let's pick up where we left off. The war just got a little more interesting because England and France and Spain and the Affranchi and the government and the rebels are all fighting in this seven-sided war. So, what's happening, everybody? Let's break this down. Slave responses. What were the slaves doing? Hundreds of thousands decided to join the rebels, but not everybody automatically joins the army. Some would help the rebels by giving food and information as spies, but continue to work. Some were forced to join the rebels. It was join or we're going to kill you. Some would help their masters escape because they had some loyalty to their masters still. And as freedom became more and more common, soldiers became less enthusiastic to fight for control of the island. So in many cases, they would fight for a couple months, but eventually they said, okay, we're good. I got my freedom. I'm just going to go into the jungle and set up my own farm and have a nice family. And so we had a lot of problems of keeping the army going because a lot of slaves just wanted to have their freedom and enjoy it. Some former rebels would take over plantations and they'd grow their own food to become peasants and grow their own thing. So how did the involvement of European powers affect the colony? All sides were using slaves or rebel troops to fight for them. So the colonial government of France was arming slaves with the promise of freedom for their service. So if you fight for France, you will get your freedom. The English, the Spanish, and the colonial government leaders were trying to gain the allegiance of the rebel leaders and say, okay, if you join us, hey, then we'll give you a special treatment afterwards. The rebels are playing both sides to figure out who has the best deal. And so early on, the Spanish were promising land and freedom for the rebels. If you fight with Spain, we'll give you these plantations. And the rebels under the command of this new leader, Toussaint Louverture, decided to join the Spanish along the border because they were offering weapons as well as land when the war is over. So the rebels joined Spain. England forces were allying with the desperate white planters in the south. So England decides to choose the whites in this case. France, becoming very frustrated with this whole situation, decides to give in. France officially abolishes slavery in its colonies. And this was their attempt to get the slaves back on their side and fight for them to kick out the Spanish and the English. And it works because they were already French. They got what they wanted. So Louverture and the Spanish and the rebels that were fighting for Spain switched sides again, and they are now fighting for France against Spain. It's a major turning point for French forces to keep control of the island. Toussaint, new big guy, he was the son of an educated slave, and he wins the favor of his plantation manager. He works his way up as kind of an elite slave, getting the high position jobs. He's a livestock handler, then he's a healer, then he's a coachman, finally steward, and working his way up until eventually learning to read. He starts to read the Enlightenment thinkers, he's reading Montesquieu, and finally he's legally freed in 1777. So he really works his way up, gets his freedom, becomes highly educated. He's got a great mind for business, and he even owns his own plantations. He owns 2 to 3 plantations. So he's doing very well for himself from nothing. Where does his name come from? Because it's kind of an odd name. Toussaint's given because he was born on All Saints, so Toussaint, All Saints Day, November 1st. When he joined the Black Army, he quickly rose through the ranks and was doing well because he was able to find the openings in enemies' lines. And so his name is All Saints Opening, Toussaint Louverture, because he's able to be born on that day and quickly find enemy weaknesses. You're going to notice that his face changes a lot because we have no idea what he looked like, and so these are all just random black guys that they're painting and calling Toussaint, but we have no clue what he looked like. There he is again, with a completely different face. Toussaint helped his former master escape, and then he joins black forces, burning plantations, killing Europeans and mulattoes along the way. Anybody that's in his way will die. It's quite bloody. He soon discovered the ineptitude of the rebel leaders, so he joins this army and realizes the generals don't know what they're doing. It's just mindless violence with no strategy on how to win the war. And so he scorns their willingness to compromise. He says, no, let's keep fighting. Let's use some strategy. Let's think about this, because he's highly educated. So he collects an army on his own, and he trains his followers in the tactics of guerrilla warfare, because that's how they're going to win. 1795, facing very heavy losses, Spain signs a treaty with France. They give up. Spain decides they're going to give up Santo Domingo, so their half of the island is given to France, and now the entire island is now legally owned by France, and Spain backs off their troops, they retreat back to Cuba. So at this point, all we have left are the rebels and England. So the British control the south part of the island until 1798. They keep slavery and the plantations running to keep making money. Louverture and Rigaud, who is the affranchi leader, here he is, join forces to kick the British out. And this is the Battle of Jean Rebel, 1797. It's a British naval victory, and it ends all the rebel pirate attacks. So, in the end, this is their last big fight. With the British gone, all slaves are now free on this island. So the island is now completely free and controlled by France. So it's all over, slavery is done, the whole island's controlled. But then it gets worse. Then we get civil war amongst the black leaders. By the time the Civil War began, Louverture had really established himself as the leader. Here's another picture of him that looked completely different. Sonthonax is kicked out by Louverture. He lightly basically said, I'm going to kill you if you don't go back, and so he gets back on a boat to France. 1798, Louverture signs a secret deal with the US and the UK against France. So he's already plotting against France, showing that he has been recognized as the official leader of New Haiti. 1799, Louverture controls the north, while Rigaud continued to control the south. And we start to get a bit of a race war, where Rigaud's officers are all mixed race, they're all mulatto. All of Louverture's are black, and so it's the affranchi, this mixed race population versus a black population in the south. Sorry, in the north. So really it's more of a fight about economic needs. The affranchi mulattoes own 25% of all plantations, and they wanted to keep their money. They wanted to keep their land and preserve their political rights and kind of their upper status. Black leaders, however, didn't trust them because they're kind of the former slave masters. So they don't trust the mulattoes to honor the end of slavery. They're worried that they're going to try to bring it back. And they're worried that they're not going to get true equality. So it's a bit of the rich mixed-race people versus the poor black people. And so it's a year-long civil war, the War of the Knives. Louverture blockades Rigaud's army to the edge of starvation. So they surround Rigaud, here he is, until his army basically almost starves. And then he finishes them off with the knives. In return, foreign powers were involved in this little civil war. In return for guns and money for his troops, Toussaint was giving sugar and promising not to invade Jamaica and the American South. So the Americans and the British, they were worried that they might try to spread this revolution to end all slavery. So in exchange for not spreading the revolution, they're giving him guns and money. The British offered to recognize him as the King of Haiti, but he didn't want to be King of Haiti, and he also just didn't trust the English, because the English were still allowing slavery. So here's another Toussaint that looks nothing like the other guys. The U.S. even provided ships to help the blockade. Both sides hoped to gain trade deals with Saint-Domingue as France lost control. So France is falling apart, so the English and the Americans are swooping in saying, hey, you want to sell us sugar? Hey, sell us some sugar, let's make some deals, let's make some money. And so Saint-Domingue buys 10 to 15% of U.S. exports, so it becomes one of our new trade partners, because the Americans were looking to make new deals because they just lost England as a trade partner. And at that point, America and France were having a little fight over the Navy. And so an independent Saint-Domingue would weaken their common enemy, France. So everybody was kind of mad at France at this point. July 1800, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who was one of Louverture's top officials, one of Louverture's top generals, defeats Rigaud. Rigaud runs away to France, where he's going to live in exile. And so now it's Dessalines and Louverture taking over the island. So the Civil War is over. Louverture and Dessalines are in control of the island. By the end of the Civil War, France, really, they had little control of the island. They were in control of the island in name only. Louverture is appointed by the French as governor, and now he controls the whole island and begins to rebuild. His main worries: how are we going to set up an economy, especially without slavery? What is our relationship with France? Are we equals? Are they our master? Is France going to invade again? Is the English going to invade? Are the Americans going to invade? And how are we going to have peace to a pretty nasty war-torn country? especially between the French and the Spanish side. So he's got a lot of work ahead of him. And here's another Louverture that looks completely different. 1799, Napoleon shows up. So France had been at war with Europe for 7 years until finally Napoleon rises up as this new top general. He gets rid of the old government and he starts a new government with him as pretty much dictator. He declares the revolution is over and he is in charge. He sets up a new constitution, and included in this constitution is the idea that colonies would have special laws, different from those in the French constitution. This makes them worried that, what does that mean, special laws? Is he trying to bring back slavery in the colonies? So the rebel leaders are now worried because the colonies are excluded from this new constitution in the past to allow slavery. They've done this before. So this is a possible return to French rule and slavery. So Louverture decides to get ready for war. He strengthens his defenses. He invades Santo Domingo to make sure he has the whole island. And although the area was given to France in 1795, they hadn't actually invaded the Spanish side, so they move in to make sure. Louverture was worried it might be used as a base of attack, so he takes over the whole island. By 1800, the island was producing only 20% of what they did before, and he needs money to fund that war. And they just weren't making money because, well, slavery's gone. A third of all former slaves were dead, so very high casualty rate. Most white planters had run away, and so when the whites left, they took their money, and that money's going to be important to rebuild, plus their management skills. They know how to make good deals. They know how to run a plantation. And so the people that knew how to run a plantation and invest to rebuild, they're gone. That 1/3 of the workers are dead. So by 1801, the governor of Santo Domingo finally seized control of the western half of the island. Louverture is now completely in control. And here's another Louverture with a giant forehead that looks completely different. And there's another Louverture. He looks completely different. So at this point, Louverture is in complete control of the island. His first act, abolish slavery forever. Second act, he's going to form a central assembly to write a constitution for this island without permission from France. So Napoleon's going to be pretty worried about this new guy abolishing slavery forever and setting up a new constitution without France's permission. And so Napoleon's worried, but he's more concerned with the events in Europe and the future of France's power. And so it's going to end up in a conflict between these two strong leaders, Louverture and Napoleon. Let's stop there.